Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the lunch break, and thanks to those who have attended the side events. Welcome you to the final part of the Agenda 3. And I now call upon Zimbabwe to take the floor, followed by Nigeria. Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Allow me to acknowledge the presence of the President of the Victim Assistance Committee, the presentation slide, please.
We have an internet destruction from Zimbabwe, and I would like to call upon Mauritania to take the floor as we wait for the connection to stabilize. Thank you. While also waiting for Mauritania, we can give the floor to Mozambique. Mozambique, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you for permission. I will make my presentation in Portuguese. Senhor Presidente, ilustres delegados, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, em primeiro lugar, gostaria, em nome da Delegação da República de Moçambique, expressar o nosso apreço pela calorosa hospitalidade prestada e pela excelente organização deste importante evento. Sendo a primeira vez que tomo a palavra na presente sessão, permitam-me antes felicitar ao presídio e aos membros do secretariado da Convenção pela boa forma como estão a conduzir esta reunião. As reuniões intersessionais da Convenção de Proibição de Minas Antipessoal são de particular importância, pois constituem uma oportunidade para apresentar, partilhar experiências e fazer atualização sobre os progressos alcançados na implementação da Convenção, em particular na destruição de minas em áreas minadas e assistência às vítimas, numa altura em que se caminha para o ano 2025, estipulado para o fim das minas no mundo. Com o aproximar de 2025, ainda nos preocupa o uso de artefatos por grupos armados que tentam prejudicar as ações de desenvolvimento nos diferentes países, com enormes prejuízos para as populações onde têm deixado vítimas. Senhor Presidente, ao longo desses últimos tempos, maior atenção tem sido dado à assistência às vítimas de casos que possam surgir baseando nos instrumentos normativos aprovados, na qual o governo presta o apoio a todas as pessoas sem qualquer tipo de discriminação. O Plano de Ação de Maputo insta os Estados-membros a priorizar a assistência às vítimas de minas e o governo de Moçambique, no âmbito da proteção social básica, operacionalizada pela Estratégia Nacional para a Segurança Social de 2016 a 2024, implementa os programas específicos que visam a prevenção de riscos sociais, assistindo beneficiários em situação de vulnerabilidade, com ênfase ao Programa de Subsídio Social Básico, através da transferência monetária a indivíduos ou agregados familiares, incluindo pessoas com deficiência, onde fazem parte as pessoas vítimas de mina. Na assistência, podemos destacar os programas de reabilitação física e apoio psicossocial disponíveis nos centros ortopédicos e nos serviços de fisioterapia para o atendimento de pessoas com deficiência, assim como o programa de reabilitação baseado na comunidade, com uma abordagem integrada de serviços de educação, saúde, assistência social e outros, que visa melhorar as necessidades básicas das pessoas com deficiência e vítimas de minas em particular. O governo de Moçambique prioriza a criação de condições para o atendimento à pessoa com deficiência e vítima de minas em situações de emergências e em resultado de calamidades naturais ou em conflitos armados que se encontram acolhidos nos centros de acomodação. Esses casos são registrados com atendimento prioritário para as necessidades específicas das pessoas com deficiência, assim como as vítimas de minas. Na implementação de projetos socioeconômicos e na formação técnico-profissional, é garantida a inclusão de pessoas com deficiência que têm desenvolvido autoemprego e projetos de geração de rendimento. Só para citar, em 2021, foram formados em diferentes áreas 154 pessoas com deficiência, onde 18 pessoas, neste momento, encontram-se inseridas no emprego e 26 pessoas desenvolvem o autoemprego e as restantes pessoas têm desenvolvido o negócio informal que gera alguma renda. Ao cumprir os planos e programas, reconhecemos algumas instituições públicas e privadas que assumem a integração de pessoas vítimas de minas e pessoas com deficiência como seus trabalhadores, numa perspectiva de não deixar ninguém para trás. Senhor Presidente, antes de terminar, gostaria de referir que o país tem se empenhado para o cumprimento do Plano de Ação de Oslo, porém, importa destacar os desafios que ainda persistem no que diz respeito à remoção de barreiras, como as barreiras de atitude que se manifestam em determinadas situações. Outro desafio que ainda persiste está relacionado ao estabelecimento de um banco de dados que possa incluir informações específicas sobre as pessoas mortas por vítimas de minas por sexo e suas necessidades, assim como a disponibilização de recursos suficientes para o atendimento a essas necessidades. A terminar, senhor Presidente, reiteramos o compromisso do governo de Moçambique de continuar a implementar a Convenção para o bem de todos, ao mesmo tempo que felicitamos os Estados-partes pelo seu engajamento para que cheguemos ao ano 2025 com um mundo livre de minas. Pela atenção que me foi dispensada, o meu muito obrigado.
Thank you for the statement that Mozambique puts priority of the victims of landmines over others. I want to call upon Mauritania to take the floor, followed by Yemen. Thank you.
Bonjour. Tout d'abord, je voudrais avancer mes remerciements au pays hôte, la Suisse, pays des droits de l'homme. Et je remercie encore ce brillant jury de la commission d'assistance aux victimes de m'avoir donné cette opportunité pour faire écouter ma voix dans ces assises de haute instance. Je voudrais bien évidemment, l'objectif de notre réunion, c'est bien évidemment sauver des vies humaines. Et par conséquent, je voudrais donner un aperçu de la situation des victimes en Mauritanie par une présentation succincte. Slide, madame. La présentation ne passe pas. J'ai envoyé à madame Sophie. C'est dommage. J'ai envoyé à Sophie. Et avec Sophie.
Yeah, thank you, Mauritania. We will come back to you after it's sorted. So may I call upon Yemen to take the floor?
شكرا سيد الرئيس. نشكر رئاسة الاجتماع على منح وفد بلادي الكلمة. سيد الرئيس، نؤكد استلامنا لرسالتكم الموقرة في 6 من مارس حول تقدمنا للمعلومات حول الإنجازات المحققة والتحديات ضمن تدابير الشفافية للمادة 7 من اتفاقية حظر الألغام المضادة للأفراد، ونشير إلى أن كارثة الألغام الأرضية ومخلفات الحرب وغيرها من القذائف المنفجرة والغير منفجرة وكذلك العبوات الناسفة في بلادي نتج عنها ضحايا وإصابات وحوادث في مختلف المحافظات عموم اليمن. سيد الرئيس، لا يوجد أي تحديثات عن أي إنجازات في إطار مساعدة الضحايا لدينا في هذا الشأن، ولكن هناك تعاون بتشكيل لجنة من المتوقع أن تعقد اجتماعها مع مختلف أصحاب المصلحة من منظمات داعمة ووزارة الصحة في بلادي. حاليا هناك فقط تعاون محدود في المسائل المعنية بوضع خطط العمل بواقع زمني محدد، إضافة إلى عمليات التسجيل للضحايا، كما تم الرفع ضمن تدابير الشفافية للمادة 7 من الاتفاقية. سيدي الرئيس، قمنا بالتأكيد لكم وللحاضرين خلال الاجتماعات الماضية الاتفاقية بأن اليمن لديها تشريعا وطنيا وسياسة تأخذ بعين الاعتبار عامة المساعدة وإدماج جميع الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقات في المجتمعات المدنية. تم ترتيب بعض الموظفات لدينا في المسائل المعنية بنقطة الاتصال للمسائل المعنية بالجنس والاندماج في الأعمال المتعلقة بالألغام، وهذا بدعم من مركز جنيف الدولي لإزالة الألغام للأغراض الإنسانية GICHD. كما أجريت عمليات تدريب لكادر البرنامج الوطني في مختلف الجوانب ذات الصلة، وهنا بدعم من المنظمات الغير حكومية كمنظمة الهانديكاب واللجنة الدولية للصليب الأحمر في محافظة عدن. هناك تحديات كذلك كما تم الإشارة إليها في عدة محافل، ونتيجة النزاع المستمر وتدهور الأوضاع الخدمية الصحية والخدمية في البلاد، إضافة إلى الآثار المترتبة جراء كارثة الألغام الأرضية. ولكن سيدي الرئيس فإننا نؤكد لكم مرة أخرى بأن حكومة بلادي تسعى جاهدة لاستمرار الأنشطة في ذات الصلة. إن الأنشطة الحالية للأعمال المتعلقة بالألغام تهدف إلى الحد من الحوادث بين المدنيين والتعرف على السكان المتأثرين في المناطق الملغومة، إضافة إلى العمليات التوعية بمخاطر القذائف الغير منفجرة لكافة فئات المجتمع دون أي تمييز، ويتم نشر الفرق الميدانية وفق أولويات حسب الأنظمة المتبعة وبتشاور مع مختلف الشركاء المنفذين وأصحاب المصلحة. سيد الرئيس، نأمل ونتطلع إلى الدعم السخي من الأشقاء والأصدقاء في الدول المانحة والشركاء والمنظمات الإنسانية في مجال مساعدة الضحايا من خلال تقديم الرعاية الصحية وإعادة تأهيلهم ودمجهم في المجتمع المدني، وهذا يتطلب إلى وقوف الجميع في مضاعفة جهودهم ودعم اليمن في مجال مساعدة الضحايا، ولا سيما في الإسهام باستمرارية الدعم التقني لهذا السياق. وأخيرا اسمح لي سيد الرئيس أن أتقدم بالشكر الجزيل إليكم ومن خلالكم إلى الدول والمنظمات الغير حكومية التي دعمت وتعمل على دعم الحكومة اليمنية للتغلب على تلك التحديات، والذي سيسهل على حكومة اليمن في مجال مساعدة الضحايا. شكرا سيد الرئيس، شكرا للحضور جميعا.
Thank you for the presentation on Yemen, and we appreciate your efforts in ensuring that the lives of persons affected by landmines are catered for in spite of the challenges. May I call upon Mauritania to take the floor, followed by Nigeria.
Bonjour encore une fois. J'avance mes remerciements à la Suisse pour abriter cette rencontre. Et ça ne nous surprend pas, c'est l'état de droit par excellence. Je remercie le brillant jury de cette commission d'assistance aux victimes de m'avoir donné cette opportunité pour faire écouter un peu ma voix au sujet de l'assistance aux victimes dans mon pays. Je vais essayer de suivre un plan. Ici, vous voyez certainement une image qui illustre la difficulté d'accéder et de prendre contact avec la population et les autochtones de la place. Next. La Mauritanie, officiellement appelée République islamique de Mauritanie, est un pays saharien qui fait partie des pays du G5 Sahel et qui fait une superficie de 1 030 700 km². Sa situation géopolitique lui permet de servir de pont entre le nord de l'Afrique et le sud de l'Afrique. Le contexte historique et géographique, la Mauritanie est bien évidemment un pays multiculturel, multiracial, qui se retrouve comme point focal entre les Arabes africains du Nord et le reste de l'Afrique. C'est bien évidemment un pays de rencontre, bien évidemment très multiculturel et multiracial. Le nord de la Mauritanie fut le champ de bataille durant le conflit, un conflit de 75 à 78 qui a engendré un minage très anarchique, malheureusement, sans plan de pause. Next. Plusieurs décennies après, les mines continuent à tuer et à mutiler la population. Next, please. Next, please. Face à ce problème, la Mauritanie est en difficulté, a des difficultés dans ces secteurs. Madame Sophie, s'il vous plaît. C'est pas la bonne. C'est pas la bonne, madame. Non, non, c'est bien avant. Continue, non? Bref, je vais essayer de continuer sur la cadence de mes collègues Issou. Et par conséquent, la Mauritanie a créé un centre chargé du déminage et de l'assistance aux victimes. Cette structure prend en charge la stratégie nationale d'assistance aux victimes. Donc, ces champs de mines bloquent la recherche minière, bloquent la pêche, le terrorisme et la transhumance des cheptels en Mauritanie et bloquent bien évidemment les échanges sur le plan commercial et la circulation des biens. On recense aujourd'hui 638 victimes, dont 375 malheureusement décès et malheureusement 263 qui vivent avec une amputation ou une incapacité majeure. La Mauritanie a créé ce programme et qui est doté d'un service d'assistance aux victimes qui est chargé de la mise en œuvre de la stratégie nationale. Qu'est-ce que fait ce service au niveau du programme? Diffuse des messages au public, organise des formations au profit des élus, des enseignants et des administrateurs pour faire véhiculer le message au niveau des autochtones et des zones en question. Distribue bien évidemment des cahiers d'écoliers comme ça dans les établissements scolaires, demande une forte participation, fait impliquer la femme dans le cadre du principe du genre, lance des campagnes de sensibilisation à travers les radios, sensibilise les éleveurs, les nomades et autres sur le danger de ces engins mortels. Ces séances ont été d'une grande utilité pour informer la population locale. On fait ces séances avec les moyens roulants, mais aussi à dos de chameau. Comme vous pouvez le constater, ça c'est un individu du programme national de déminage qui est en train de faire des séances d'éducation au risque à dos de chameau, vu la complication et la difficulté d'accès à ces zones. Ici, on a recensé un certain nombre de missions qui fait 110 campagnes de sensibilisation en réalisant simultanément 1650 séances d'éducation au risque, reparties sur les 3 zones, sur les 3 régions les plus affectées de ces engins explosifs. Ici, vous voyez un personnel au fond du nord de la Mauritanie dans une séance de sensibilisation. Ici, on est dans l'objectif d'arriver à 260 000 individus sensibilisés sur le danger des mines, bien évidemment par le personnel du Programme national de déminage humanitaire pour le développement. Ici, on a pris quelques images, malheureusement, de quelques victimes. Ça, c'est une séance au niveau des éleveurs. Et ce qui a fait qu'on a constaté un comportement très positif de la population grâce à ces missions. Ici, dans le diagramme, nous constatons qu'à l'issue du conflit, le taux a été extrêmement élevé de victimes. Et quand on constate qu'au niveau de 2022, le niveau, il y a quand même une sacrée différence. Malheureusement, c'est la photo d'une victime criblée de balles au niveau de l'abdomen et amputée des mains. Ça, c'est une autre victime, malheureusement. Bien évidemment, au niveau de la Mauritanie, on n'a pas encore des prothèses qui facilitent la vie à la victime. On a plutôt des prothèses esthétiques. Au cours de ces années précédentes, le programme a fourni des financements grâce à des activités génératrices de revenus à un réseau d'ONG à 375 victimes de mines. Malheureusement, ça c'est une photo très sensible que je ne voudrais pas faire passer. Je passe aux obstacles majeurs, bien évidemment, comme pratiquement de l'ensemble des programmes de déminage. Le grand problème, c'est un problème de financement. Nous demandons, je profite de cette occasion pour demander à l'ensemble de la communauté internationale de venir soutenir nos activités, soutenir notre effort dans le cadre de l'assistance aux victimes. Tout ce que nous faisons aujourd'hui et ce que fait l'ensemble de la communauté internationale, bien évidemment, c'est pour sauver des vies humaines et améliorer un peu la vie, la qualité de la vie des personnes victimes d'engins explosifs. Dans ce cadre, la Mauritanie manque de points de santé spécialisés. D'ailleurs, durant la rencontre qu'avaient effectuée mes frères et collègues algériens, on a été invité par le gouvernement algérien et qui nous a fait visiter un centre spécialisé dans le cadre de l'assistance aux victimes. Et c'était d'une grande importance, très, très riche, très enrichissant. Manque de soins de premier secours, parce que les gens, malheureusement, sont dans des conditions un peu difficiles et très éloignées de grandes villes. Indisponibilité et difficulté d'accès aux ambulances, l'effectif réduit des personnels qualifiés. Ces individus ont été recrutés par le Programme national de déminage dans le cadre de leur insertion dans la vie active. Ce monsieur est aujourd'hui fonctionnaire au niveau du Programme national de déminage et qui fait partie de l'équipe de sensibilisation au niveau des services de sensibilisation et d'assistance aux victimes. De même que cet individu, ce jeune garçon, qui a d'ailleurs été invité par mes frères algériens la dernière fois, et qui est aujourd'hui fonctionnaire au niveau du Programme national de déminage. Sans plus tarder, j'ai essayé d'être le plus succinct possible, même si les diapos n'ont pas aidé beaucoup. Je vous remercie et je suis prêt à toute question ou suggestion. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mauritania, for giving us that detail on the situation and the positive trend that you are getting in spite of the challenges. So may I now call upon Nigeria to take the floor as we connect back to Zimbabwe. Thank you.
President, Mr. Chairman, panel members, participants, good afternoon. And thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to highlight the Humanitarian Man Action Program in Nigeria. Permit me to say that Nigeria is a state party to several conventions and treaties that are related to humanitarian man action. Nigeria is signatory to the Anti-Personnel Man Convention, which is our main topic here, but it is also a signatory to the Cluster Convention Munition, the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, and also the Conventions on the Right of People with Disabilities. Out of all these three, there are elements that has to do with the subject matter of victim assistance. Permit me to say that the first issue that brought Nigeria to have a mine action program was the Anti-Personnel Mine Convention in 2019. Before then, the issue was anti-personnel mine. So as an ad hoc arrangement, the federal government of Nigeria instituted an interministerial committee drawn from several of the relevant committees to look at the issue of Nigeria's responsibilities under the Anti-Personnel Mine Convention. However, as an extended mandate and also to have a comprehensive program, the federal government in 2022, that's just last year, at the margins of the International World Humanitarian Day, the president gave a directive to set up a National Humanitarian Mine Action Committee. That is to say, this is a committee that will take care of issues not only related to the Anti-Personnel Mine Convention, but also issues with CCM, CCW, and the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Permit me to say, this stand by Nigeria is contextual regarding how the federal ministries in Nigeria are arranged. Under the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, this committee was set up, which now acts as the de facto National Mine Action Authority for Nigeria. Under the same ministry, named Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, the idea was to look at humanitarian mine action as a humanitarian and developmental endeavor. When you look at the 5 pillars of the mine action, you will see that the federal government of Nigeria felt the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs was in the better position to coordinate. However, the committee that is acting under that is an interministerial, as is the nature of humanitarian mine action. With regards to the victims of mine action or victim assistance, the United Nations Humanitarian Overview for Nigeria for 2023 estimates that there are 1,170,000 people in need of humanitarian mine action assistance. This includes whether it is explosive ordnance risk education, whether it is victim assistance, psychosocial or economic aspect. But I would like to draw the attention of this distinguished gathering that these are the figures that comprise the Northeast, that is in the states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, where Nigeria has been fighting an insurgency against the Boko Haram and the ISWAP. However, in our history, we have had a very nasty civil war in the years 1967 up to 1970. Unfortunately, also in the southeast of Nigeria, apart from the Northeast, there are incidents or areas that have been contaminated by different kinds of explosive ordinances. I felt it's very important to underline that because usually it is the conflict in the Northeast that draws our attention. In the southeastern states, a preliminary investigation has identified 685 survivors of mine action and 493 mine victims. So in every plan we are doing, we are looking not only at the Northeast, we are also looking at the Northwest of the country. For the victim assistance in particular, the National Humanitarian Mine Action Committee, which I said is the de facto NMAA for Nigeria, has incorporated certain agencies that have a mandate for people with disabilities or victims. For example, the National Commission for People with Disabilities is represented in the National Humanitarian Man Action Committee. We also have the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Women Affairs. This is to ensure that diversity and inclusion is mainstreamed throughout the mine action in Nigeria. With regards to the social inclusion of mine victims, under the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, there is the National Social Investment Program. And under this program, the government ensures that survivors and victims of mines are also, incorporated in every socio-economic activity that the government is doing. On this note, I would also like to bring the attention of this honorable gathering that the International Committee of the Red Cross, in collaboration with the Nigeria's Ministry of Health, has a center at the University of Maiduguri, that is in the northeast where the insurgency is most, that provides prosthetics and other assistive devices to people that are victims who need support. Having said that, permit me to say that the humanitarian mine action program on Nigeria is relatively new. We are probably the newest face in this gathering. And on that respect, first I have to thank all international mine action stakeholders and national governments that since this committee was set up in October last year, we have received tremendous support, either in terms of advice or assistance, whether it is national bodies like in Azerbaijan, Algeria, Senegal, Cambodia, or UN agencies like UNMAS, which has been acting like the NMA in the absence of a body, and UNICEF, as well as agencies like GICHD, like Halo Trust, MAG, and FSD, as well as Danish Refugee Council. So we thank on behalf of Nigeria, all these agencies, and we call on you to please render assistance to Nigeria as we get our programs off of the ground. We are not oblivious of the fact that Nigeria has been slow in fulfilling its obligations. But the setting up of this National Humanitarian Man Action Committee with a presidential directive is a very welcome development, and it signifies Nigeria's commitment to ensure that her national obligations under all the relevant conventions and instruments are fulfilled. On this note, I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting and also to call on all state parties and international mine action stakeholders to please continue to render assistance as we come knocking on your door. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigeria, for the presentation and highlighting areas where you have made positive actions and the challenges you are facing to ensure that we have a mine-free world. We've been waiting for Zimbabwe online. I don't know our connection. And see something. So Zimbabwe is on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Allow me to acknowledge the presence of the President of the Victim Assistance Committee and all the dignitaries. Zimbabwe is very grateful for the opportunity that you've given us to give feedback or progress update on the victim assistance programs that we have embarked on so far. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide, please. Following the operationalization of the National Disability Policy in 2021, Zimbabwe has taken strides in the implementation of victim assistance. The National Disability Policy is a guiding framework on the implementation of disability programming, which also includes victim assistance. To note is the establishment of a national task force on the implementation of victim assistance This task force has been authorized, and several ministries have been co-opted into this task force, which is soon to begin. And the task force comprises of government ministries and organizations of and for landmine victims. Next slide. The task force main objectives includes coming up with victim assistance implementation strategy. This will help in the implementation of victim assistance and call upon collaboration and comprehensive programming. Then it will also ensure comprehensive implementation through coordination of activities and establishment of clear referral pathway. This is very important because it has been noted that landmine victims, they do not only need psychosocial support or assistive devices, but there are other services like education and basic social services that they also are in need of. Hence, the referral pathway is very critical. Then the committee will also ensure provision of psychosocial support and provision of assistive devices and other basic social services. Next slide. Zimbabwe has embarked on a needs assessment, and this has been spearheaded by the Ministry of Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare, which is the lead ministry in implementing victim assistance in Zimbabwe. It has started with Mudzi district, and this is a pilot project where the ministry conducted needs assessment exercise in Mudzi. On the picture is the Director of Disability Affairs conducting the needs assessment program in Mudzi district. And here, 8 members, 6 males and 2 females were interviewed and provided with psychosocial support. And the needs assessment also looked at other needs that landmine victims also need assistance, for other areas where they also need assistance in. And it does not only center around provision of assistive devices, but it was noted that even issues of education, even issues of health and rehabilitation, they still need rehabilitation services and health services and educational services as well. So this is a pilot where the needs have been compiled and interventions along these specific needs are being made. Next slide. We also see that victims were registered for empowerment projects because most of them, they cited that with capital or with support, they can then be able to live independently just like anyone else. So they were registered for empowerment projects. And we see that these empowerment projects are not only meant for the landmine victims, but they are also catering for other persons with disabilities, since the ministry is also the custodian of legislation of the implementation of the disability programming within the country. Next slide, please. The Ministry of Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare, in partnership with the Ministry of Information, also filmed a documentary. This documentary captured the lived experiences of landmine victims in Mudzi district. So the victims in Mudzi district were also received some food assistance from the ministry, and this is just a pilot which is supposed to move on to other districts. And the next target is Rushinga district, where also these documentaries capturing these lived experiences are going to be done, for they help in making sure that assumptions are not made when it comes to intervention strategies, but they address the actual needs of landmine victims on the ground. Next slide. On another note, the Zimbabwe now has a Mine Victim Association organization. This was registered as a private voluntary organization and also was accredited by Zimbabwe Mine Action, and it is solely into victim assistance implementation. The organization was registered and accredited in March 2023, and it is operating in Zimbabwe and focuses on provision of assistance to landmine victims. It has also started operations in 3 districts, Buera, Mount Darwin, and Nyamapanda, and it mainly also at the moment it is mainly focusing on doing baseline surveys, because as Zimbabwe, we do not have disaggregated data. It is one of our challenges. So all our programs, we are starting to tap on the existing programs that we may have data available that will inform our programming. Next slide, please. Then we move on to challenges that we as a country we are encountering. The absence of biometric database disaggregated by age, gender, and location has compromised quality service provision specific to landmine victims. This is whereby as Zimbabwe, we are calling for a national survey for landmine victims, but at the moment, we are just doing the baseline surveys as we do our programming, as this will help us to get primary data. Then location of medical facilities remains a hindrance in responding to emergencies and access to medical services, particularly for landmine victims. This has been exacerbated by the fact that landmine infested areas are located in hard to reach remote areas of the country. So the health facilities are inaccessible and they are very far. So there is then need to increase mobile health clinics in these areas. Next slide. In conclusion, through the implementation of the policy, Zimbabwe remains committed to providing appropriate, affordable, and accessible services to landmine victims and survivors on an equal basis with others, together with all other persons with disabilities. It is also anticipated that the needs assessment exercise will be expanded to cover all the affected areas in Zimbabwe. The exercise will assist in coming up with national statistics on landmine victims and survivors across the whole nation and their specific needs. Once this is in place, needs-based interventions can then be designed and implemented effectively. Also to note is that Zimbabwe has started outreach programs where they are also together looking at the needs of all other persons with disabilities, looking at the specific needs of landmine victims during the outreach programs. With that, I would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity, and we believe in Zimbabwe we are committed and will continue to implement landmine victims. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, for highlighting the areas of action, and we will be waiting for you during the meeting of states parties to participate and provide more. If there are no other states parties who would like to make their interventions, I would want to call upon our partners in this implementation. So may I call upon the representative of the European Union to take the floor, after which we shall have ICBL. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to thank the Committee on the Victim Assistance for your work, in particular for actively seeking to enforce cooperation and increase synergies with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and other relevant human rights and disability actors and instruments. And at the outset, let me stress that I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states and the candidate countries, Turkey, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Ukraine, Republic of Moldova, and Bosnia and Herzegovina align themselves with this statement. Mr. Chair, We are grateful for including rehabilitation as a key component of victim assistance in the program of this year's intersessional meeting. We realize that there are states parties to the convention that continue to face challenges in delivering rehabilitation services to the victims of landmines. While mine clearance programs have a definitive conclusion, victim assistance is an ongoing process that requires sustained long-term engagement as well as national ownership. EU mine action is therefore a long-term commitment. We work with assistance organizations and national authorities in affected countries to use available resources effectively and to contribute to integrating victim assistance into broader disability and development policies at the national level. From this perspective, the EU is actively supporting the efforts of states parties to implement their victim assistance programs. The EU especially welcomes the work conducted by the Victim Assistance Committee on Action 40 of the Oslo Action Plan, devoted to safety and protection of mine survivors in situations of risk and emergencies, including situations of armed conflict, humanitarian emergencies, and natural disasters. 30 state parties, some of which are the least developed countries on Earth, have significant numbers of anti-personnel mine victims in need of assistance. These countries are facing complex challenges in fulfilling their responsibilities. Priority needs must be defined and assistance must be provided for the sake of humanity and dignity. In line with Action 48 of the Oslo Action Plan, we must take steps to ensure that all mine victims, including in rural and remote areas, have access to comprehensive rehabilitation services and psychological support services. The EU is committed to assist national authorities in building their internal capacities to provide victim assistance in order to safeguard their people from the threat of mines, including mine of an unprovoked nature, and to assist mine survivors, affected families and communities in an inclusive, non-discriminatory, and gender-sensitive manner. In the framework of the implementation of the ongoing Council decision CFSP 2021/257, and with the input of the Committee of Victim Assistance, we extend our support to states via national and or regional stakeholders dialogue in the Americas, Europe, Central and Southeast Asia, the Middle East, North Africa, Horn of Africa, and Sub-Sahara regions. Those dialogues will seek to support state parties in strengthening their multi-sectoral efforts in ensuring that the victim assistance implementation is in line with relevant CRPD provisions. In this context, the EU welcomes the ISU consultations with the respective committees on hosting a workshop on victim assistance for members of the National Victims Board in Colombia, plus a dialogue and 5 preparatory meetings to support consultations and input with stakeholders for an updated Article 5 work plan. The EU joined the states parties that have contributed to the sponsorship program and to the work of the ISU by further supporting the victim assistance expert meeting, including by sponsoring participation of mine survivors and campaigners. The project also sponsored a dialogue in Zimbabwe to promote support for Zimbabwe's ambition to achieve its 2025 mine clearance goal. Furthermore, the EU supported Sudan in hosting a national dialogue to finalize inputs for its national strategic framework on victim assistance, which was in the making for nearly 2 years. Finally, the EU is contributing to the 3rd Conference on Victim Assistance and the Rights of Mine Survivors to take place in Cambodia in October. By adopting the Oslo Action Plan, states parties reaffirmed their commitment to ensuring the full, equal, and effective participation of mine victims in society based on respect for human rights, gender equality, inclusion, and non-discrimination. The EU would support a third global conference with experienced victim assistance practitioners, the UN Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility, and a member of the Committee of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to review the Oslo Action Plan implementation and contribute towards a new action plan to be adopted by the international community in 2024. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, European Union, for the committee welcomes and appreciates the EU statement and their commitment in supporting countries across the globe in efforts to provide humanitarian interventions, especially for landmine survivors. And in addition, the European Union has been able to provide financial and logistic support for conferences, for supporting LDCs in attending some of these conferences. Thank you very much. I would like to call upon the ICPL, after which Italy will take the floor. Thank you. Welcome.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous sommes ici aujourd'hui car les mines terrestres et les restes explosifs de guerre continuent de représenter un grave danger pour les civils. Lorsque nous parlons d'assistance aux victimes, nous devons reconnaître qu'encore beaucoup trop de personnes ne survivent pas à l'accident, n'ont jamais la chance de se rétablir, d'accéder à des services ou de raconter leur histoire. Un grand nombre de victimes meurent simplement parce que les services médicaux d'urgence ne sont pas disponibles ou pas suffisamment proches. Mais nous oublions aussi trop souvent l'impact invisible des mines terrestres, notamment sur la santé mentale. C'est pourquoi nous apprécions le choix du Comité sur l'assistance aux victimes de se concentrer sur la santé mentale et le soutien psychosocial, conformément à l'action 38 du plan d'action d'Oslo et à la NILAM 13.10, et nous attendons avec impatience la discussion de demain. Près de 4 années se sont écoulées et en 2024, les États partageront leur succès dans le cadre du plan d'action d'Oslo. Toutefois, les victimes de mines et de restes explosifs de guerre restent confrontées à des défis considérables. L'année 2024 sera donc aussi l'occasion de réfléchir aux domaines dans lesquels nous avons pris du retard et d'intensifier nos efforts dans les domaines où les lacunes sont encore visibles. D'après les données de l'Observatoire, les réactions des survivants et de nos collègues travaillant dans les pays touchés, nous pouvons d'ores et déjà prévoir que les besoins resteront importants l'année prochaine. Premièrement, environ la moitié des États parties ayant une responsabilité reconnue à l'égard des victimes de mines et de restes explosifs de guerre doivent élaborer des plans pertinents pour répondre aux besoins et aux lacunes en matière d'assistance. Deuxièmement, de nombreux États parties doivent encore adopter une approche intégrée de l'assistance aux victimes, assurer la prestation de services par le biais d'efforts plus larges, comme le prévoit la NILAM 13.10 sur l'assistance aux victimes. Troisièmement, les États et le secteur de l'action contre les mines devraient tenir compte du genre, de l'âge, du handicap et d'autres facteurs de diversité lors de la planification, de la mise en œuvre et du suivi des services. Cela permettra de mieux s'adapter aux besoins et aux réalités des différents groupes. Quatrièmement, dans plusieurs États parties, l'accès des victimes au système de santé, aux opportunités économiques et aux écoles peut encore être amélioré. Nous appelons les États bailleurs à remédier au sous-financement de l'assistance aux victimes, en particulier des soins de santé et des activités de réadaptation. Enfin, les conflits armés, les urgences humanitaires et les catastrophes naturelles de l'année dernière ont mis à rude épreuve l'assistance aux victimes. C'est le cas en Ukraine et au Soudan, avec la destruction des installations sanitaires, en Afghanistan et au Yémen, avec l'effondrement des systèmes de santé, et dans l'est de la Turquie, avec le récent tremblement de terre. À cet égard, ICBL rappelle aux États parties l'importance d'assurer la sécurité et la protection de tous, y compris des survivants de mines et des autres personnes handicapées, ainsi que de mettre en œuvre une action humanitaire inclusive conformément à l'action 40. Entre-temps, nous encourageons les approches régionales, comme la récente réunion regroupant les États africains et les États de la région MENA qui s'est tenue en Algérie, à laquelle ont participé des membres d'ICBL. Et nous encourageons les États non parties à faire rapport sur l'assistance aux victimes, comme lors du récent séminaire organisé par l'Azerbaïdjan, en tant qu'étape vers les objectifs et l'esprit de la Convention, mais aussi en tant qu'étape vers l'adhésion à celle-ci. En outre, nous appelons les 14 États parties responsables de victimes de mines terrestres qui n'ont pas encore soumis leur rapport au titre de l'article 7 à le faire. Tirer le meilleur parti des rapports sur l'assistance aux victimes, notamment en adoptant une approche centrée sur les personnes. Ces rapports, avec des données ventilées par âge, genre et handicap, permettront de mieux communiquer les besoins et les progrès réalisés dans la mise en œuvre des engagements du plan d'action d'Oslo. Enfin, et en conclusion, nous appelons les États parties, les opérateurs de l'action contre les mines, les agences de l'ONU et les organisations de survivants à discuter de possibles plans répondant aux défis réels lors de la conférence mondiale sur l'assistance aux victimes qui aura lieu en octobre au Cambodge. Nous devons tous échanger les meilleures pratiques et discuter des défis mondiaux rencontrés dans la mise en œuvre des engagements de l'assistance aux victimes afin de faire avancer les choses jusqu'à la prochaine conférence d'examen. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, ICBL, for the update on the activities to raise awareness of the effects of landmines and the activities you have done to support different countries. I now call upon Italy, followed by the Interagency Coordination Group on Mine Action. Italy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor, and thank you for all your efforts as a chair of this important committee. Italy aligns itself with the statement of the European Union. I will also like to have some remarks in my national capacity. Providing assistance to victims is more important than ever due to growing conflicts that have a direct impact on the lives of millions of people living in contaminated areas. Mine Action is at the core of the Italian humanitarian assistance, and to this end, a dedicated fund for humanitarian demining was set up in 2001. In 2022, we have allocated approximately 8.5 million euros to initiatives in this field carried out by many international organizations such as UMES, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining in a number of countries such as Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Iraq, Mali, Niger, Syria, Somalia, and Sudan. As an incident can have massive consequences on a person's life, in our action, we focus on victims' assistance in order to meet the needs of the most vulnerable people in emergency contexts, such as people with disabilities. We know that providing this kind of assistance requires an holistic and integrated multi-sector approach, which combines physical rehabilitation, psychosocial support, and social economic integration. Being Italy a senior member of the Committee on Victims Assistance, allow me, Mr. Chair, to provide some examples of Italy's experience as a donor in this sector. In Ethiopia, to the International Committee of the Red Cross, we are providing rehabilitation assistance to prisoners, to people living in remote areas or in places where conflicts are in progress, or to other vulnerable groups who have difficulty accessing essential services. We support people with disabilities, progress in their socioeconomic inclusion directly or through the support of other organizations by enabling them to obtain support for their livelihoods, access educational opportunities, or participate in sportive activities. In Mali, we are supporting physical rehabilitation centers, in particularly through the first physical rehabilitation center in Mopti in the framework of the Program for Humanitarian Impact Investment. In Niger, we are providing funds to the ICRC for specific rehabilitation activities for the production of tricycles, which are more suitable for the sandy terrains of these areas compared to the conventional wheelchairs. And we focus greater attention to the most vulnerable people, including victims of violence and migrants. We are aware that this sector is unfortunately, as we have heard so far, still severely underfunded. Even though we have made progress, there are still a number of challenges. It would be important, for instance, to ensure availability, accessibility, and affordability of rehabilitation-related technologies through more open and competitive markets, and by ensuring information sharing among states. From this perspective, universities and private sector companies could be involved. The Italian cooperation will continue supporting victims' assistance activities and initiatives also in the future. And I would like to thank you again for letting us share our experience in this field, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Italy, for that statement and support of the victim assistance, especially in the hard-to-reach areas in the Sub-Saharan Africa and other areas of the globe. May I call upon the interagency coordination group on mine action to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for this opportunity to deliver a statement on behalf of the United Nations Interagency Coordination Group on Mine Action. The data that we've gathered to monitor trends in the 38 countries that have UN mine action presences identifies a decrease in casualties from mines, explosive remnants of war, and improvised explosive devices from an average of some 17,000 per year between 2015 and 2019 to an average of just over 11,000 per year from 2020 to 2022. The reduction is driven in large part by a decline in casualties in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, and Syria. In Iraq, for example, the casualty rate fell from 5,000 in 2018 to 800 in 2022. The reduction can be attributed to a number of factors, including successful clearance operations, effective risk education efforts, and a reduction in the number of armed attacks 5 years after the end of military operations against ISIL. But despite this progress, we're concerned about the recent appearance of an increase of explosive ordnance incidents in West and Central Africa. Children are particularly at risk. In 2022, the monitoring and reporting mechanism on grave violations against children verified more than 8,000 children maimed or killed in 25 situations of armed conflict, a significant proportion of whom were casualties of explosive ordnance. The Oslo Action Plan requests states parties to have a national referral mechanism in place to facilitate access to services for mine victims. And in 2022, 14 UN mine action programs were supporting referral pathways compared to only 10 in 2018. In Colombia, the UN supported the Mine Action Authority to update existing referral pathways, and as a result, 84 municipalities are now able to support new and existing victims. In Nigeria, the UN helped to map services for victims, leading to the establishment of a referral pathway in the northeast of the country. When referral pathways are not available, the UN may provide direct assistance. And so in 2022, UNICEF and its partners expanded victim assistance programming to reach almost 5,700 children in 12 countries. The range of services also expanded to include cash transfers, family treatment and rehabilitation, and livelihood support. In Yemen, 245 child victims in the most affected governorates received prostheses and referrals to appropriate services. The UN also promotes economic opportunities for victims. In Cambodia, UNDP supports skills training, small business management training, job placement, and grants for disabled persons organizations. But victim assistance funding for child and adult survivors is desperately needed in many countries, as many of you have noted already in this room, including Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Mali, Myanmar, Nigeria, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. To call attention to the rights and needs of victims, in December of last year, the United Nations appointed Mr. Giles Dooley as the global advocate for persons with disabilities in conflict and peace-building situations. He'll speak later this week at the National Directors and UN Advisors meeting on the importance of ensuring that the voices of persons with disabilities, including survivors of explosive ordnance incidents, are included in conflict resolution and peace-building processes. Earlier this year, the UN endorsed an international mine action standard on victim assistance, which was developed in consultation with many stakeholders and clarifies the roles and responsibilities of mine action actors. And I hope it will be a useful contribution to reaching the objectives of the convention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the intervention. And I think the list of speakers is exhausted. If there are any other delegations that may not have got an opportunity, will have opportunities in other committee sessions. And therefore, in conclusion, I want to thank all states parties, observers, organizations for your interventions today that contribute effectively to victim assistance. I want also to thank the host country, Switzerland, that has been supporting victim assistance in many areas and even supporting the Victim Assistance Committee events, and which have made some of that support possible to make this session possible. And therefore, I want to say that we have come a long way in integrating victim assistance into the core of our work and making strides towards the empowerment of mine survivors and in the recovery of affected families and communities. We have to continue and strengthen our efforts. And allow me once again to remind you of the milestones, events, and opportunities in victim assistance this year. Tomorrow, we'll be joined by a number of experts for a discussion on mental health and psychosocial support. There is a lot of momentum to further our MHPSS efforts, and we are very happy to host the panel to continue promoting and shedding light on this important matter. From the 17th to 19th October of this year, the government of Cambodia will host a global conference on victim assistance with backing from the European Union and with the assistance of the Implementation Support Unit of the Personnel Mind Ban Convention. The conference will provide a unique opportunity by bringing together experts and stakeholders from around the world to discuss and think and learn and inspire and empower, creating ways towards a brighter future from mine victims. On the margins of the 21 MSP in November 2023, the committee will also host an annual victim assistance experts meeting, and we look forward to seeing many of you there. These events will support the build-up of the momentum towards the 5th review conference next year, and we invite you to contact the committee and the ISU for any assistance you may need to boost our efforts on victim assistance. I thank you once again, and I want to welcome Article 5 committee for the next session. Thank you very much for your support and interventions.
It's coming.
You coming? See what happens?
Excellences, distingués délégués, chers collègues, c'est un plaisir pour les membres du comité de l'article 5 d'ouvrir cette session consacrée aux questions liées au mandat du comité sur l'article 5, sur la mise en œuvre de l'article 5. Comme je vous l'ai indiqué ce matin, la France a l'honneur de présider cette année ce comité et travaille en lien très étroit avec les autres membres du comité, l'Irak, la Colombie et la Suède. Les activités conduites par le comité sont décrites dans les observations préliminaires qui ont été mises à votre disposition sur le site internet de la Convention. Donc, je n'entrerai pas à ce stade dans les détails. Et dans la mesure où nous sommes un petit peu pressés par le temps, je souhaiterais que nous abordions tout de go les différentes parties de ce point à l'ordre du jour. Tout d'abord, nous traiterons de la question des États parties qui ont soumis une demande de prolongation. Ensuite, nous aborderons la question des États parties auxquels il a été demandé des plans d'action actualisés. Et enfin, nous ferons un point sur le processus d'examen des demandes de prolongation au titre de l'article 5 de la Convention. Donc, permettez-nous d'abord de commencer avec la première partie de ce point à l'ordre du jour concernant les États parties qui ont soumis des demandes de prolongation pour examen par l'Assemblée des États parties au mois de novembre. Un seul État a formulé une telle demande, c'est l'Ukraine. Et donc, je donnerai dans quelques instants la parole aux représentants ukrainiens. Et puis ensuite, je donnerai la parole à toute délégation qui voudrait ou qui souhaiterait s'exprimer sur la demande de prolongation qui nous a été soumise, avant de redonner une nouvelle fois la parole à l'Ukraine. Avant d'en arriver là, à ce stade, permettez-moi de vous donner un rapide aperçu de la situation concernant le processus de demande de prolongation qui nous occupe. Comme vous le savez, les États, l'Assemblée des États, la 7e Assemblée des États parties en 2006 a convenu d'un processus particulier pour la préparation, la soumission et l'examen des requêtes des demandes de prolongation au titre de l'article 5. Les décisions qui ont été arrêtées à cette occasion prévoyaient que les États parties qui sollicitaient des demandes de prolongation au titre de l'article 5 étaient encouragés à soumettre leurs demandes au moins 9 mois avant la réunion des États parties ou la conférence d'examen au cours desquelles leurs requêtes seraient examinées. Donc, pour en revenir à la situation de l'Ukraine, le comité de l'article 5 a reçu une demande d'extension de l'Ukraine le 31 mars dernier. Cette demande a été mise à la disposition de l'ensemble des États parties sur le site internet de la Convention. conformément à la volonté du comité de rationaliser l'examen de ces demandes de prolongation, et également conformément aux méthodes de travail qui sont celles du comité, nous avons procédé à un examen préliminaire de cette demande d'extension pour nous assurer que les informations fournies par la délégation ukrainienne permettrait au comité de remplir sa mission. Dans cette perspective, nous avons contacté la délégation ukrainienne afin d'obtenir des informations supplémentaires, informations qui nous ont été fournies le 2 juin dernier, information également qui est disponible sur le site de notre convention. À la réception de ces informations complémentaires, nous avons pu inviter les organisations expertes et l'ensemble des parties prenantes à examiner cette demande d'extension. Pour mémoire, ces organisations sont sélectionnées sur le fait qu'elles constituent elles ont des compétences reconnues dans l'expertise du déminage et qu'elles sont particulièrement actives dans les travaux qui concernent la Convention. Nous considérons que les contributions de ces organisations internationales et de ces experts qui travaillent pour elles sont de la plus haute utilité pour les travaux que nous menons au sein de ce comité, et en particulier dans le cadre de notre dialogue avec les représentants ukrainiens. Elles ont en effet, pour la plupart, une connaissance directe de la situation sur le territoire ukrainien, et plus généralement sur la situation des territoires concernés par des problématiques de destruction et d'élimination des mines. Donc nous sommes tout à fait reconnaissants auprès de ces organisations et de ces experts pour leur engagement et pour le travail qu'elles réalisent au profit du comité de l'article 5. Et s'agissant de la demande de prolongation de l'Ukraine, nous attendons avec impatience de recevoir leur contribution. Nous allons continuer notre dialogue coopératif avec l'Ukraine pour nous assurer que le travail que nous menons afin d'analyser cette demande de prolongation soit couronné de succès et que cette demande puisse être prête pour à l'examen des États parties à la 21e Assemblée des États parties. Finalement, donc, au nom du comité, j'aimerais vraiment remercier l'Ukraine qui a fait preuve de beaucoup de volontarisme et de volonté dans la préparation et la soumission de cette demande d'extension, de prolongation. Et en particulier, je voudrais souligner le fait que cette demande de prolongation ait été soumise en temps opportun, en temps voulu, ce qui nous a permis d'entretenir ce dialogue coopératif qui est à la base de l'esprit qui anime les États membres, les États parties de notre convention. Donc nous sommes tout à fait reconnaissants aux délégués ukrainiens d'avoir pleinement contribué à ce dialogue. Alors, à ce stade, permettez-moi maintenant de donner la parole aux représentants ukrainiens afin qu'ils puissent présenter leur demande de prolongation. Vous avez la parole.
Dear Mr. Chair of the committee and members of the committee, dear Director of the ISU, distinguished participant of the meeting. The Secretariat of the National Mine Action Authority, in order to inform the international community, has prepared a request regarding of the extension of the implementation of Article 5 of the Ottawa Convention. On February 24, 2022, the Russian Federation launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, using all types of weapons, including those prohibited by the Ottawa Convention, which led to the contamination of a large part of the territory of Ukraine with mines and explosive remnants of war. All territories where active hostiles have been conducted or are ongoing, which are under temporary occupation, and territories that have been subject to air, missile, and artillery strikes are considered potentially contaminated. Today, approximately 130,000 square kilometers of land and 14,000 square kilometers of sea areas need to be surveyed for explosive hazards. The 160,000 square kilometers, including areas that have been subject to military operations, rocket and bomb attacks, and areas under temporary occupation. A full assessment of the contamination can be carried out after the Russian aggression is repelled and sovereignty over the entire territory of Ukraine is restored. The contamination of the territory with explosive remnants of war has a significant impact on the safety of civilians, agriculture, industry, and the overall social economic growth in the country. In total, 15 million people in Ukraine are indirect beneficiaries of mine action. Next slide, please. The dense contamination of territories with explosive objects due to the aggression of the Russian Federation and its violation of the laws of war creates a high risk of incidents for the civilian population, including during agriculture activities. According to the data received by the Secretariat of the National Mine Action Authority, since February 24, 311 mine-related incidents have occurred, affecting 489 people. 165 people were killed, including 7 children, and 324 were wounded, including 33 children. Unfortunately, the statistic of the victims continue to increase and needs to be updated daily. Next slide, please. The Russian Federation Armed Forces indiscriminately and massively use the full range of available aviation, missile, artillery, and multiple launch rocket system munitions against peaceful cities, critical infrastructure, and agricultural land, including munition equipped with remote delivery anti-personnel mines. Ukrainian sappers detect and neutralize banned POM-2, the newest POM-3, which has nickname Medallion, PTM-3, PTM-4, PFM-1S. And danger from the use of remote means is that self-destruct mechanism do not work in 20-30 cases. And the presence of seismic target sensor and magnetic field sensor in modern Russian mines doesn't allow for their search and destruction by conventional means, but requires the use of expensive remote demining equipment. Russian mines, both anti-tank and anti-personnel mines, have plastic casings, which significantly complicates the search and ensures the long-term operation. Next slide, please. The armored forces of the Russian Federation widely use an arsenal of conventional landmines, which are prohibited by the Ottawa Convention and Protocol 2 of the Convention of Prohibition or Restriction on the Use of certain conventional weapons, which may be deemed to be excessively injurious or to have indiscriminate effects. Thus, today, due to Russia's actions, many areas of Ukraine territory are contaminated with minefields of PMM-4, modern Russian anti-personnel mines, PMM-2, PMM-3, in addition to settlements, forests, and roads contaminated with mines of the MON and OZM types, which are installed on tripwires. The use of the above mines is a gross violation of Protocol 2. In addition to anti-personnel mines, vast areas are mined with TM62 anti-tank mines with traps, laid with the use of anti-personnel mines. An important statistical indicator that affects the during of demining is that when the Russian accused mine the area, more than 30% of the mines are set in a non-removable state, including with the use of booby traps. Next slide, please. After the occupation, the Russian defense forces have discovered a large number of improvised explosive devices and booby traps, many of which were installed in residential areas, vehicles, critical infrastructure, and even food. There have also been cases of mined bodies, including civilians and even children. Next slide. Russian armored forces are mining Ukrainian territory water. Cases of sea mines being washed up on the Ukrainian coast have become more frequent, and other countries in the Black Sea region are beginning to face this problem. And in addition, the terrorist act committed by Russia by blowing up the Kadov's hydroelectric power plant dam led to uncontrolled migration of mines that were laid by the aggressor on the left bank of the Dnipro River, which put territories outside the area of hostilities in danger. Mine contamination of the flooded area will remain a problem for many years to come. Next slide. The social, economic, and humanitarian needs of the population in the liberated territories determines the top priority of demining at power supply, heat supply, water supply facilities, transport infrastructure, public places, and agricultural land. Engineering demining units and groups of the Armored Force of Ukraine, the State Special Transport Service, and the National Guard of Ukraine, pyrotechnic units of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine, and explosive groups of the National Police of Ukraine are involved in these works. Certified mine action operators are also actively involved in demining. According to demining experts, the implementation of measures to quick operational response to threat from explosive device can take from 3 to 5 years. And this is without taking into account the circumstances that exist in the temporary occupied territories. Next slide, please. The problem of contamination of the territories with explosive ordnance that Ukraine has faced as a result of Russian aggression is comparable to the scales that face Europe after World War II. So the resource needs of demining specialists is high. Look on humanitarian demining on such scale, the government of Ukraine has decided to increase Ukraine capacity to increase the number of pyrotechnic units of the SS up to 1,500 people, and forming humanitarian demining units within the armed forces of Ukraine and the state special transport service, with a total number of up to 5,000 people. However, the formation of these units requires the support of the international community in equipping with vehicles, modern explosive ordnance detection equipment, remote control mechanized demining equipment, and super protection equipment. Next slide. Overcoming the consequences of mine contamination of the territory of Ukraine by the Russian Federation requires a long time and significant material resources. Based on this, Ukraine has prepared and submitted to the state parties a request for an extension of the deadline for fulfilling its obligation under Article 5 of the Ottawa Convention. Ukraine express its sincere gratitude to all the countries that have contributed to the support and assistance as such as a difficult time for our country, with engaging in a war for independence and sovereignty. It is also a war for a civilization choice. Ukraine is defending its belonging to Europe's civilization, and at the same time, the fundamental values, rights, and freedoms, which are the basic on the war's morality. We are confident that we will win, and together we will be able to make our land safe again. Thank you for your attention.
Merci. Je remercie le distingué délégué de l'Ukraine pour son intervention. Et maintenant, je souhaiterais donner la parole à toute délégation qui souhaiterait prendre la parole pour discuter de cette demande de prolongation. Donc, je crois savoir que l'ICBL souhaiterait s'exprimer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the ICBL thanks Ukraine for submitting its draft extension request under these very challenging circumstances and for presenting it today. Before we turn to specifics about the extension request, we want to briefly address the elephant in the room, that is, use of anti-personnel mines by Ukraine. We find ourselves in an unprecedented and highly regrettable situation. Not only is a state not party, Russia, saturating its state party, Ukraine, with anti-personnel mines, but the state party itself is using banned anti-personnel mines. Ukraine's use has been closely examined in the field and confirmed by ICBL member Human Rights Watch and others. We invite you to look at Human Rights Watch's latest briefing paper, Landmine Use in Ukraine, which was prepared for this meeting. Ukraine has indicated that it has taken such reports very seriously But we have yet to hear from Ukraine a concrete denial or an admission or an explanation or an indication that an investigation has been carried out or is underway, or any other substantive response. Based on the evidence put forward to date, this is without question the most serious violation of the Mine Ban Treaty since it was negotiated in 1997. Ukrainian civilians will not only suffer years and years from Russia's unconscionable, massive use of mines and booby traps, but they will also suffer from the anti-personnel mines of the Ukrainian army. The government of Ukraine must, without delay, explain itself, repledge itself to never use anti-personnel mines under any circumstances, and once again become a member in good standing of the Mine Ban Treaty. We will speak at greater length on this tragedy in the later session on compliance. But the ongoing use certainly makes Ukraine's Article 5 extension request all the more important. We fully recognize that Ukraine's planning and mine action operations on the ground have been significantly impacted and limited by the ongoing conflict. We also understand Ukraine is not in a position to provide some of the fundamental elements for any Article 5 deadline extension, such as a detailed work plan for survey and clearance. Considering the heavy humanitarian toll that the recent use of anti-personnel landmines and other explosive remnants of war has taken on the people of Ukraine, with Ukraine itself citing the number of 770 casualties, and the fact that the existing and potentially new contamination will likely continue to have a significant humanitarian impact in years to come. It is absolutely critical that Ukrainian authorities undertake every possible effort to protect civilian populations from this threat. We understand that Ukraine has been conducting some risk education activities. It is vital that a comprehensive targeted risk education program continues in the future until the existing contamination can be fully cleared. Therefore, Ukraine needs to include a plan for mine risk education in affected communities as part of its current request. In the interest of the people at risk and as required by the Oslo Action Plan, this plan needs to be detailed and costed. It needs to contain information on where the risk education will take place, by whom, to which target groups it will be directed, and using what methods. Ukraine also needs, the plan also needs to be accompanied by a clear budget to ensure adequate resources are allocated for these life-saving measures. Equally vital in this respect is marking and fencing of all known and suspected hazardous areas to exclude and protect civilians. This is an obligation under Article 5 that at the moment is missing from the request. Yet it needs to remain a top priority as we continue seeing terrifying footage of Ukrainian civilians engaging in homemade mine clearance and farmers adapting and mine-proofing tractors in the face of a food security crisis and ongoing struggle to carry out livelihood activities. While we understand the current operations focus on emergency EOD interventions and clearance of vital infrastructure, we encourage Ukraine to plan for and carry out systematic survey in locations with safe and secure access. These steps would help to start determining the extent of contamination and hopefully enable its prompt clearance as soon as feasible. Concluding, under the current circumstances and pending submission of a comprehensive risk education plan, we fully support granting Ukraine an interim extension of its Article 5 deadline of a couple of years to facilitate its formal compliance. We hope the hostilities will end soon, at which point Ukraine would need to develop and present a complete request inclusive of a detailed survey and clearance plan. Thank you.
Je remercie le distingué délégué de la campagne internationale pour interdire les mines terrestres. Et je souhaite maintenant donner la parole au Norwegian People Head au nom du Mine Action Review.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm delivering this statement on behalf of the Mine Action Review. We'd like to thank Ukraine for its statement on Article 5 and its extension request. Mine Action Review recognises the multiple and complex challenges Ukraine faces since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, and we commend Ukraine for its dedicated efforts to address the large-scale contamination from mines and other forms of explosive ordnance under extremely difficult circumstances. However challenging the circumstances, though, nothing justifies Ukraine's own use of anti-personnel mines during the conflict. Article 1, paragraph 1A of the Convention obligates state parties to undertake never, under any circumstances, to use anti-personnel mines. This includes all situations of armed conflict and even when a state is the victim of aggression. With respect to Article 5, we welcome the fact that Ukraine has submitted a request to extend its Article 5 clearance deadline, and also provided some additional information to the Committee on Article 5 implementation. We understand that, due to the ongoing conflict, Ukraine is not able to submit an extension request containing full information on the scale of mine contamination on its territory or a detailed plan for addressing mined areas at this current time. Mine Action Review welcomes what we understand and hope is a reduction in the amount of time requested to extend Ukraine's Article 5 deadline from 10 years to 5 years or less. No blanket extension would be acceptable under the circumstances and given the evidence of use of anti-personnel mines by Ukraine itself, thereby contributing to the problem. We also welcome Ukraine's plans to expand the humanitarian demining capacity of the armed forces and the State Special Transport Service by an estimated 5,000 personnel, and note Ukraine's need to provide these additional demining units with equipment. We recommend that Ukraine commits to cease all use of anti-personnel mines immediately, confirms that it is now requesting a 5-year extension to its deadline rather than the 10-year extension originally sought, commits to comprehensive annual reporting on progress in survey and clearance of mined areas, and to producing an updated annual work plan reflecting the available data each year during the extension period. Strives to ensure that it disaggregates mined areas which contain anti-personnel mines or mixed anti-personnel mines and anti-vehicle mines from areas only containing anti-vehicle mines, both in its non-technical survey data collected and reported and in its clearance data collected and reported. Strives to ensure that it disaggregates anti-personnel mines, including victim-activated booby traps, from other types of explosive ordnance contamination in its reporting on devices found and destroyed, and continues to conduct non-technical survey of mined areas under its jurisdiction and control. Returning to the issue of use of anti-personnel mines, state parties at 20 MSP rightly condemned the use of anti-personnel mines anywhere, at any time, and by any actor. The prohibition on use is categorical and there are no exceptions. State parties must uphold this obligation at all times, including during armed conflict, and they must hold each other to account on the absolute prohibition on use in order to safeguard the norms and success of the Convention and the protection of civilians. The nature of use by Ukrainian armed forces almost certainly amounts to the most serious violation of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention since its entry into force in 1999. Its gravity demands that every state party comply with its obligation to ensure respect for international humanitarian law by condemning all use by Ukraine without equivocation. Mine Action Review therefore calls upon the government of Ukraine to investigate and report back to the Convention on the reported use of anti-personnel mines by Ukraine without delay. Secure Ukraine's stockpile of PFM anti-personnel mines and ensure that no stockpiled mines can be used in combat operations under any circumstances. Furthermore, Ukraine should ensure destruction of all remaining stockpiled anti-personnel mines as soon as possible. In order to avoid the state parties needing to take action on this issue under Article 8, Paragraph 2 of the Convention, Ukraine must be transparent and respond to the request for clarification from the Committee on Cooperative Compliance. Ukraine must respond to this very serious issue now and not delay its response until the end of hostilities in Ukraine. Lastly, we note and condemn the large-scale use by Russia, a state not party to the Convention, of multiple types of anti-personnel mines and victim-activated booby traps on Ukrainian territory. However, once again, this does not justify Ukrainian use of prohibited weapons. I thank you.
Je remercie la distinguée déléguée du NAP et rappelle à cette occasion que les questions liées au respect de la Convention seront examinées ce mercredi. Et maintenant, je souhaiterais donner la parole au GICHD.
Thank you, Chair. The GICHD would like to congratulate the government of Ukraine on submitting an Article 5 extension request. We recognize that security situation in Ukraine is very unstable, that the ongoing hostilities are continuing to result in new contamination, which is further hampering the national authorities' ability to plan and implement mine action activities, including systematic survey and clearance operations. This, of course, makes it difficult for Ukraine to develop an evidence-based and costed work plan in line with Action 19 of the Oslo Action Plan. We are therefore pleased to note that Ukraine does not object to the Article 5 Committee's proposal to reduce the requested extension from 10 to 5 years. During this time, further steps can be taken to achieve greater clarity. Despite the prevailing challenges, significant efforts is clearly being placed to identify, map, and report all types of contamination across Ukraine following the principles outlined in IMAS. This is in keeping with the spirit of Action 18 of the Oslo Action Plan, and it's notable that a substantial number of confirmed and suspected hazardous areas have already been identified and recorded in Ukraine's information management system for mine action. The extension request could be strengthened by inclusion of details on both the currently available capacity to conduct non-technical survey in the areas that are accessible, as well as any plans to further strengthen that capacity. Additional information gathering the type of explosive contamination already identified as confirmed or suspect hazardous areas, for example, by disaggregating anti-personnel and anti-vehicle minefields, would also support more accurate planning and projections. We note that the initial request did not include information related to risk education activities and plan, or data relating to the number of accidents or victims. However, the additional information provided to the Article 5 Committee does contain some details relevant to these issues in line with Action 24 and Action 35 of the Oslo Action Plan. Ukraine has a national action plan on women, peace, and security, which mentions mine action. We feel that the extension request could usefully make reference to this, especially in relation to the plans to establish government mine clearance operations, including the recruitment and training of an additional 5,000 personnel, as both the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and the Oslo Action Plan encourage the participation of women in mine action. Finally, the GICHD would like to reaffirm its commitment to supporting Ukraine on its path to eventual completion. Thank you.
Je remercie la distinguée déléguée du GICHD pour son intervention. Et maintenant, je souhaiterais donner la parole au représentant de Allo Trust.
Thank you, Chair. HALO stands with Ukraine and our colleagues and friends. HALO has over 700 colleagues in Ukraine with plans to double that over the next 12 months. Their work saves lives and is a vital precursor to reconstruction. HALO is pleased to be participating in a high-level panel at this week's Ukraine Reconstruction Conference held in London. We are grateful for the partnership with the government of Ukraine and also the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the Department for Business and Trade. We note and acknowledge the important statements made by our civil society colleagues, as well as their role and contribution to the work of this convention. The convention would not be as strong as it would be without them, nor would it fulfill its vital role in preventing humanitarian suffering and indiscriminate harm. We recall that mutual accountability and transparency is the basis of this convention, and we are sure that Ukraine will take on board the feedback from our civil society colleagues. Thank you.
Je remercie la distinguée déléguée de Allo Trust pour son intervention. Et maintenant, je souhaiterais donner la parole à toute délégation qui souhaiterait s'exprimer. Très bien. Je ne vois pas de délégués souhaitant s'exprimer. Je vous en prie.
Niger.
Je donne la parole au distingué délégué du Niger.
Bonsoir, Monsieur le Président. Bonsoir à tous. C'est un honneur pour nous de vous présenter la situation du Niger vis-à-vis de l'article 5. Le Niger, depuis un certain nombre d'années, multiplie ses efforts pour mener des actions en vue de déminer les zones et les superficies restantes à dépolluer dans la partie nord du pays. Il s'agit des mines antipersonnelles à action locale.
Pardon, monsieur le délégué, je me permets de vous interrompre. Je vous propose d'intervenir sur la situation du Niger un petit peu plus tard pour terminer avec l'examen de la demande de prolongation de l'Ukraine. Bon, nous reviendrons vers vous ultérieurement. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres demandes d'intervention? Actuellement, je n'en vois pas. Donc, je vous propose de donner à nouveau la parole au distingué délégué de l'Ukraine pour répondre, le cas échéant, aux interventions qui ont été prononcées par les représentants de la société civile.
Ukraine is protested against statement that Ukraine armed forces is using anti-personnel mines as a fact. During our meeting on the day number 3, we will give more detail.
Très bien.
Thank you very much.
Je remercie le distingué délégué de l'Ukraine pour sa réponse, dont nous prenons bonne note. À ce stade, donc je voudrais vous remercier pour les interventions que vous avez prononcées. Je souhaiterais également faire quelques remarques concernant la situation de l'Érythrée. Comme vous le savez peut-être, l'Érythrée n'a pas soumis de demande de prolongation pour la destruction des mines antipersonnelles encore présentes sur son territoire et se situe par conséquent en situation d'infraction au regard des obligations de la Convention. La situation de l'Érythrée sera examinée un petit peu plus tard par le président de notre convention ce mercredi. Donc, je n'en dirai pas davantage. À ma connaissance, aucun représentant de l'Érythrée est présent aujourd'hui parmi nous. Donc, nous ne pourrons pas davantage engager le dialogue sur ce point-là. Des efforts importants ont été entrepris, aussi bien par les membres du comité de l'article 5 que par la présidence allemande, efforts qui vous seront rapportés ce mercredi. Je voulais simplement souligner que la situation actuelle de l'Érythrée est un sujet de vive préoccupation pour tous les représentants qui ont en charge le bon fonctionnement de cette convention et qu'évidemment, nous souhaitons trouver une solution rapide à la situation actuelle. Ceci étant dit, permettez-moi maintenant de passer à la deuxième partie de notre ordre du jour, qui concerne la situation des États parties auxquels il a été demandé de soumettre des plans d'action actualisés conformément aux décisions prises en lien avec leur demande de prolongation précédemment accordée. Parmi les 9 États parties qui devaient soumettre un plan d'action actualisé le 30 avril dernier, donc la Bosnie-Herzégovine, la Colombie, la République démocratique du Congo, l'Éthiopie, la Mauritanie, le Nigeria, le Sénégal, la Somalie et la Turquie. 5 l'ont fait. Il s'agit de la Colombie, du Nigeria, du Sénégal, de la Somalie, et de la Turquie. Nous avons également reçu, entre-temps, un plan d'action actualisé de la part du Cambodge et nous sommes dans l'attente également de la soumission d'un plan d'action actualisé plus tard cette année de la part de l'Irak et du Tadjikistan. Je crois que nous avons également un plan d'action en suspens de la part du Niger. Donc peut-être que le délégué nigérien nous en dira plus à cette occasion. Évidemment, nous ne saurions sous-estimer l'importance pour les États parties d'adhérer aux décisions qui concernent les demandes de prolongation pour s'assurer de la continuité de notre dialogue coopératif. J'aimerais maintenant inviter les États parties qui ont soumis un plan d'action ou qui sont dans l'attente de le faire, de bien vouloir prendre la parole, s'ils le souhaitent, pour une présentation sur donc leur plan d'action actualisé et le cas échéant sur l'état de soumission de leur plan d'action. Donc, c'est maintenant pour moi l'occasion de donner la parole au distingué délégué du Niger. Monsieur le délégué, vous avez la parole.
Ok. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonsoir à tous. Donc, le Niger, depuis un certain nombre d'années, multiplie ses efforts pour mener des actions en vue de déminer les zones et les superficies restantes à dépolluer dans la partie nord du pays. Il s'agit des mines antipersonnelles à action locale et bondissante. Pour ce qui est des demandes de prolongation, la première prolongation de 2 ans obtenue, dont la date butoir était fixée au 31 décembre 2015, était acquise sur la base de déminer une superficie de 2400 mètres carrés. Suite à cette demande de prolongation, des études techniques effectuées par les spécialistes nigériens en la matière ont permis de relever 39 304 mètres carrés d'espace contaminé et une autre zone juxtaposée des minages de type antipersonnel dont la superficie avoisine 196 243 mètres carrés. La deuxième prolongation obtenue par le Niger à Santiago en Chili en décembre 2015, qui a pris fin le 31 décembre 2020, était acquise en vue de déminer les superficies citées si haut. Soucieux du respect de ses engagements vis-à-vis de la Convention d'Ottawa sur l'interdiction des mines antipersonnelles, le Niger a déployé des équipes de déminage sur les fonds propres de l'État. À ce jour, les 39 300 mètres carrés sont totalement déminés et 18 483 mètres carrés dans les 196 243 ont été également déminés. La superficie restante à déminer s'élève à 177 767 mètres carrés. Malheureusement, aucune aide ou assistance n'a été apportée dans le cadre de ces opérations par les partenaires, ce qui a poussé le Niger à demander une troisième prolongation des délais supplémentaires de 4 ans pour pouvoir se débarrasser de ces mines antipersonnelles. Cette demande de 2021 à 2024 a été accordée et un plan de mise en œuvre a été également soumis à l'unité de mise en œuvre de la Convention. Par manque de moyens et de soutien extérieur, ce dossier n'a pas réellement avancé. À l'heure actuelle, le Niger est dans l'incapacité de détruire toutes les mines antipersonnelles par manque de financement. Il faut noter également des nouvelles menaces auxquelles fait face le Niger en ce moment, comme les mines antipersonnelles improvisées sur certaines zones frontalières. Le Niger mettra du temps avant de venir à bout de ces engins de mort et ne donne pas de garantie de la dépollution du site miné d'ici fin 2024. Les autorités du pays avec les partenaires multiplient les efforts pour le renforcement des capacités des forces de défense et de sécurité en matière de déminage et la sensibilisation de la population sur les dangers que représentent ces engins de mort. Les travaux de transformation des NILAM en normes nigériennes de l'action anti-mine ont été faits avec l'appui technique de l'équipe UNMAS. En dépit de toutes les difficultés citées plus haut, le Niger travaille en collaboration avec plusieurs de ses partenaires techniques et financiers dans le cadre de l'aboutissement de ce dossier qui constitue une priorité nationale. Au demeurant, le Niger mettra tout en œuvre pour la finalisation du déminage des mines présentes sur son territoire, conformément aux normes internationales d'action contre les mines et les procédures nationales en vigueur. Je vous remercie.
Je remercie le distingué délégué du Niger pour son intervention. Et maintenant, je souhaiterais donner la parole au distingué délégué de la Bosnie-Herzégovine.
Thank you, Mr. President, committee members, director of the issue. Taking responsibility of the becoming state party of the Ottawa Treaty, Bosnia and Herzegovina took over commitment to preserve lives and mitigate the social economic consequence and anti-personal mines and the explosive remnants of war. It makes me proud that my country has been an active partner in international community field against anti-personal mines, and we are strongly united in the beginning to use stockpiling, production and transfer of these harmful assets. Mines and other remnants of the war on the worst consequence of the war still committed our land, making normal life of the civilian population sometimes impossible. the consequences have a destructive impact on our population, as well as of environment of national economy. Begin where the very step can land danger part. The mining is a key rule, rebuilding life without fear and safely economy tourism process. This, despite strong efforts of the past decade and more on the country is the still of the most mine contamination countries on the world and the most several affairs affected in the region. From the beginning, the technical survey and the mine clearance operation in Bosnia and Herzegovina and are 3,328 square kilometers was returned to safe use and about 150,300 pieces of the mines ARV were found and destroyed. The current size of the suspected hazard area is 858 square kilometers, which is about 1.67% of the total country size. Based on more precisely understanding of the remaining challenge and according with Article 5, Paragraph 1, Bosnia and Herzegovina request extension of the deadlines for 6 years from 1st March 2021 until March 2027. Returning land and use closely returned to state goals of the sustainable development because numerous minefields in Bosnia and Herzegovina have a social, economic, humanitarian, commercial, and ecological impact. Considering and BIH is paving the way of sustainable development, mine action should be seen as something that not only removes dangers or reduces accident of the fear, but something that enables and accelerating with sustainable development. Through the mine action program in Bosnia and Herzegovina, efforts will be made to better understanding impact or opportunity through the clearance in terms of enable development and contributable fulfilling of sustainable development goals. Resultant indication in this year as well is expected in implementation of the projects financed of the Federal Republic of Germany and United States of America. Principal donors for mine action inspire for activity better results in the coming year. Also, the implementation of two important projects underway, including projects Brčko without mines and Via Majevica. Scoring the three municipalities of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and two municipalities in Republika of Srpska. In 2022, we are expecting the beginning of implementation through the IPA instrument of the EU assistance in the total amount on 10 million euro, which planning through grants fund for 2022-2024, or depending of the dynamic of the implementation. In February 2023, the projects we have started with INSMA core database begin financed by Federal Republic of Germany. For this reason, one again express my gratitude to emphasizing the circle the rule and important donor contribute in the coming period as well. In 2022, Bosnia and Herzegovina will start the revision of the mine action strategy period 2018-2025. The activity which will be carried about Bosnia and Herzegovina Mine Action Center in cooperation with national and international partners. At the end of the 2023, we will present analysis and proposal for the action plan. My risk education projects are being implemented by the teams of the Bosnia and Herzegovina Mine Action Center, Accreditation Demining Organization, My Risk Education Organization, for an EOM. From the beginning of the 2023 until 42,200 people have been warned of mine dangers. It's also very challenging of the hear stories from survivors, people who is the not lost hope and the not acceptable situation by shape effective mine account. Unfortunate accidents still happen. In 2023, there was a mine accident with the fatal outcome, which is we continued with full capacity warning activity through independent projects, but also trying to integrate it into current mine contamination operation in order to put mine dangers in focus. In this way, we are trying to include consequences with risk which the impact population, economic, their every activities. With the framework of the possibly competition, we are particularly ensuring conditional of the compact inclusion of my victim in the social economic activities. Through participant in the development of program, there improve psychosocial, medical, and professional service for my victims. Putting people on the core of the development efforts, we are working on the reminding my victims and the families on the social and products members. Try to psychology and psychological rehabilitation with focus on the socio-economic environment. We are expecting in the 2023, the coordination body for mine victim assistance will also be reactivated in order to coordination with my victim assistance projects and or awareness about needs to my victims with the social as well national and international level. Mine action efforts is essential component in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Journey to stability, the cannot be any assured of the safety. We are roots of the files and mind, and we children can still find and play with objectives. The mind exploded, and we are people one are aware of the risk, still entering the mine zone because the life depends of it. I would like to pay tribute to those who are important field of the mine action at community and national level, and of course donors and the many other important according to condemnation of this adventure. We are really we are well that we are conditioned the life saving for under experiment challenges circulate of the risk of lives. We are sadly remember those who lost their lives in the important work of the humanity. Thank you.
Je remercie le distingué délégué de la Bosnie-Herzégovine. Et maintenant, je souhaiterais donner la parole aux représentants de l'Éthiopie.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. President. I want to join others who spoke before me in congratulating you for the commendable way in which you are presiding this intersessional meeting. Mr. President, on 29 November 2019, the 19th meeting of the state parties assessed request submitted by Ethiopia for an extension of its deadline for completing the destruction of anti-personnel mines in mine areas in accordance with Article 5 of the Convention, and agreed to grant the request for an extension until 31st December 2025. Since then, Ethiopia has been annually providing reports to the state parties on progress made in implementation during the extension period. In this context, my brief intervention therefore focused only on the main points achieved during the period in discussion. Mr. President, in its second request for an extension deadline, Ethiopia has made projection for the year when each of the remaining 261 areas known or suspected to contain anti-personnel mines will be released. In the period 2019 to 2025, it's projected that 35 areas known to contain anti-personnel mine, totaling 6 million square meters, and also 226 areas suspected to contain anti-personnel mines, totaling 1,050,045,000 square meters, to be released in 6 regions of countries. In terms of clearing the mine areas of as of 31st March 2022, Ethiopia was able to data clearance land release by surveying and the clearance of 110 areas, measuring in total 330 million square meters, of which 270 million accounts for data entry clearance. Reduced through resurveying and 13,400 square meters. That clear, which result is an area known as 5 zone being declared complete in Somalia region, and the previously suspected hazardous areas are now no longer suspected from anti-personnel mines, trade, and declared safe for social and developmental activities. In this course of carrying out the operations to clear these areas, a total of 46 anti-tanks mines were destroyed, and all the areas were released using manual clearance method. The remaining area to be addressed in 152 areas, measuring a little over 726 million square meters, will be part of next plan until December 2025. However, much work to be done. Mr. President, as you may very well know, Ethiopia recently ended a conflict in the northern parts of the country, and there are indications of presence of additional layer of explosive ordnance contaminations. This requires conducting a broad survey, and the Ethiopia Mine Action Office plan to employ advanced technical survey in different regions of the country, and the recent peace agreement providing a good opportunity for mine action, particularly access to remote and affected areas. In this regard, I want to also emphasize Ethiopia is in preparation to develop a new work plan that encompasses the current situation. Having said this, due previous lack of access, capacity, and human and financial resource constraints, the likelihood of becoming mine-free by the end of 2025 is impossible. Despite clearance of 110 areas in 2022, several challenges still remain in our way to fulfill our commitment to make the territories in our jurisdiction free of mines. Some of the challenges are first, as I mentioned earlier, the recent conflict and the political instability. Many areas across the country are inaccessible and very scattered. To conduct comprehensive surveys and constrain our office to perform clearance operations as indicated during the extension request. Second, it was expected that the government of Ethiopia and donors would continue to finance the humanitarian demining activities, which unfortunately still continue to pose a critical challenge in demining activities. However, some steps taken by the office to train the units to address this task. It still needs international support in terms of techniques and finance. Despite this challenge, Ethiopia has made significant progress in its mine action efforts over the past decade. The country has established a National Mine Action Center, the Ethiopian Mine Action Office, which is responsible for coordinating and implementing all mine action activities in the country. Finally, Mr. President, I want to affirm the commitment of the government of Ethiopia to fully comply with its main responsibilities of completing the destruction of anti-personnel mines in accordance with Article 5 of the Convention. We are committed to continuing our work aimed at ensuring that anti-personnel mines are never used again. I also want to reiterate the importance of supporting victims and survivors to rebuild their lives. To this end, we are looking forward to the continued constructive engagements with all stakeholders, and we are also confident that through collective effort, we'll complete the clearance in reasonable period of time. In addition, I want to conclude by thanking the implementation support units and the Committee on Article 5 implementation for their continued assistance to my country. Also, would like to thank all donors, including Japan, Canada, Italy, and the European Union, as well as the United Nations Mine Action Services for their support. I thank you, Mr. President.
Je remercie le distingué délégué de l'Éthiopie pour l'exhaustivité de son intervention. Je crois comprendre que les traducteurs nous seraient reconnaissants de bien vouloir leur fournir le script de vos interventions afin de faciliter leur travail, notamment quand il s'agit de traduire des chiffres. Ceci étant dit, je vais désormais donner la parole au distingué représentant de l'Irak.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس، السيدات والسادة الحضور. نود أن نتقدم لكم وإلى رئيس وأعضاء لجنة المادة الخامسة بالشكر والتقدير على الجهود المبذولة في تنفيذ المهمة سيدي الرئيس، لا يخفى على سيادتكم إن خطر الألغام المضادة للأفراد والألغام ذات الطبيعة المرتجلة من مخلفات عصابات داعش الإرهابية لا زالت تفتك بأبناء شعبنا، ولا زالت آثارها الاجتماعية والاقتصادية والبيئية تعرقل الاستقرار والتنمية، وتمنع العوائل النازحة من العودة إلى مناطق سكناهم على الرغم من كل الجهود الكبيرة التي بذلت. سيدي الرئيس، إن بلادي ملتزمة بتنفيذ بنود الاتفاقية وتعمل على تنفيذ إجراءات خطة عمل أوسلو، بالإضافة إلى تنفيذ التزاماتنا تجاه تنفيذ الخطة المحدثة الثانية لطلب التمديد وحسب الإمكانيات والقدرات المتوفرة، وجاري التحضير لكتابة الخطة المحدثة الثالثة للعامين 2024-2025 مع تقييم التنفيذ للخطة السابقة وتحليل التحديات وإيجاد الحلول المناسبة للخروج بخطة واقعية التنفيذ وفقا للإمكانيات البشرية والمالية لحكومة بلادي، حيث سنستعرض على الحضور موجز التحديات التي تواجه حكومة بلادي من تطهير الأراضي الملوثة. أولا، مساحة التلوث الكبيرة بالألغام المضادة للأفراد والألغام ذات الطبيعة المرتجلة لا تتناسب مع القدرات الوطنية المتاحة بالوقت الحالي والدعم الدولي المقدم إلى العراق وقلة عدد المنظمات الأجنبية والدولية. ثانيا، الظروف المناخية وارتفاع درجات الحرارة فضلا عن التضاريس الصعبة لحقول الألغام المضادة للأفراد، وتحديدا في الحدود المشتركة مع الجمهورية الإسلامية الإيرانية، والتي تتطلب جهودا كبيرة للتطهير التي تؤدي إلى إعاقة تقدم العمل. ثالثا، استمرار اكتشاف حقول ألغام جديدة مما تؤدي إلى زيادة حجم التلوث، وتتطلب تعديل خطط برامج الإزالة وفقا للأولويات الوطنية. ونستعرض للحضور الكرام التقدم التي تم إحرازه في تنفيذ برنامج إزالة الألغام. أولا، من خلال أعمال المسح غير التقني تم اكتشاف مساحة قدرها أكثر من 12,443 مترا مربعا لحقول الألغام المضادة للأفراد، ومساحة قدرها أكثر من 53,458 مترا مربعا لحقول الألغام المضادة للأفراد ذات الطبيعة المرتجلة، وتحديدا في المحافظات المحررة من عصابات داعش الإرهابية فيما يخص المحافظات التي تحت إشراف دائرة شؤون الألغام. ثانيا، إلغاء مساحة لحقول الألغام المضادة للأفراد قدرها 12,731,465 مترا مربعا من خلال أعمال المسح غير التقني وتقليص الخطر لمساحة قدرها 23,839,843 مترا مربعا من أعمال المسح التقني، وتطهير مساحة قدرها أكثر من 3 ملايين مترا مربعا من أعمال الإزالة فيما يخص المحافظات تحت إشراف دائرة شؤون الألغام. ثالثا، إلغاء مساحة لحقول الألغام المضادة للأفراد ذات الطبيعة المرتجلة قدرها أكثر من 23,283,000 مترا مربعا من خلال أعمال المسح غير التقني وتقليص الخطر لمساحة قدرها أكثر من 47 مليون مترا مربعا من أعمال المسح التقني، ومساحة قدرها أكثر من 8,062,000 مترا مربعا من أعمال الإزالة فيما يخص المحافظات تحت إشراف دائرة شؤون الألغام. رابعا، تطهير مساحة قدرها 1,007,321 مترا مربعا فيما يخص المساحات تحت إشراف المؤسسة العامة لشؤون الألغام في إقليم كردستان العراق. سيدي الرئيس، إن المساحة الإجمالية الملوثة بحقول الألغام المضادة للأفراد في العراق تبلغ أكثر من 1194 كيلومترا مربعا، والمساحة الإجمالية الملوثة بحقول الألغام المضادة للأفراد ذات الطبيعة المرتجلة تبلغ أكثر من 542 مليونا و992 ألفا من المتر المربع، حيث تعمل السلطة الوطنية في العراق المتمثلة بوزارة البيئة دائرة شؤون الألغام والمؤسسة العامة لشؤون الألغام في إقليم كردستان العراق بإعداد خطة عمل وبمشاركة وزارتي المالية والتخطيط لكتابة خطة واقعية التنفيذ وتأمين مواردها البشرية والمادية من الموارد الحكومية للدولة تنفيذا للمادة الخامسة من الاتفاقية. ويأمل وفد بلادي من الدول الأطراف والمنظمات الأجنبية والدولية تقديم الدعم اللازم لدعم تنفيذ خطة العمل هذه، وبالتنسيق المباشر مع السلطة الوطنية إسوة بمبادرة الاتحاد الأوروبي ودائرة الأمم المتحدة للأعمال المتعلقة بالألغام بمشروعها لتطهير الأراضي الزراعية في محافظة البصرة قضاء شط العرب ولمدة عامين الماضية. سيد الرئيس، كما يعلم الجميع بأن جمهورية العراق قدمت طلبا لتمديد التزاماته تجاه المادة الخامسة من الاتفاقية في عام 2018 ولمدة 10 سنوات ولغاية 2028، وهذه الخطة كانت واقعية بطروحاتها ومرهونة التنفيذ بتأمين الموارد البشرية والمادية لتنفيذها. وحكومة بلادي جادة وبكل الإمكانيات المتاحة لها البشرية والمادية من أجل أن نكون بالطريق السليم للتنفيذ. وإن حكومة بلادي سعت إلى تأمين الموارد المالية من خلال الاقتراض الخارجي وبمبلغ 400 مليون دولار من وكالة ضمان الصادرات البريطانية UKEF، وقامت بإدراج جهود وطنية جديدة لبرنامج شؤون الألغام الوطني للأغراض الإنسانية والمتمثل بمديرية المتفجرات التابعة لهيئة الحشد الشعبي وقيادة حرس الحدود التابعة لوزارة الداخلية، ليكونان جهد وطني جديد يعمل تحت السلطة الوطنية للأغراض الإنسانية وفقا للمعايير الوطنية والدولية بشؤون الألغام. ويلتمس وفد بلادي من الدول الأطراف والدول المانحة والمنظمات تقديم الدعم لهذه الجهود الوطنية الجديدة في مجالات التدريبات المتخصصة وتزويدهم بالأجهزة والمعدات المتطورة اللازمة لتنفيذ الأعمال. سيدي الرئيس، إن السلطة الوطنية في جمهورية العراق مستمرة بتحديث ومصادقة 24 معيارا وطنيا يخص الجانب العمليات في برنامج شؤون الألغام، وجاري تنفيذ الدورات التدريبية للجهات العاملة في العراق ضمن برنامج تطوير القدرات الوطنية للجهات التنفيذية، والتشجيع على إقامة شراكات بين المنظمات الأجنبية والوطنية لتنفيذ أنشطة شؤون الألغام من أجل بناء قدرات وطنية مستدامة قادرة على مواجهة التحدي المتبقي من التلوث بالألغام. ونعمل على تقييم قاعدة البيانات الوطنية الحالية للتحول إلى نظام إمسماكور، والذي نأمل أن يتم استكمال هذه الانتقال مع نهاية هذا العام، وبدعم من مركز جنيف الدولي لإزالة الألغام للأغراض الإنسانية GICHD. ومستمرين على تكييف أنشطة الأعمال المتعلقة بالألغام لتكون متوافقة مع أهداف التنمية المستدامة لعام 2030 بالتنسيق مع وزارة التخطيط وتعميم مفهوم التنوع الاجتماعي بين السلطة الوطنية والشركاء من المنظمات والشركات المفوضة، والعمل على بناء قدرات في أعمال الرقابة وبدعم من دائرة الأمم المتحدة للأعمال المتعلقة بالألغام UNMAS. ختاما سيدي الرئيس، إن جمهورية العراق تؤكد حرصها الشديد على الالتزام الكامل ببنود هذه الاتفاقية، وتتقدم لكم وللمجتمع الدولي كافة ولوحدة دعم التنفيذ ببالغ شكرها لاهتمامكم وثقتكم ودعمكم من أجل بناء عراق مزدهر خالي من الألغام. وشكرا لإصغائكم.
Je remercie le distingué délégué de l'Irak pour son intervention. Merci. Il est 17h44. Le directeur de l'unité d'appui m'a informé il y a quelques instants que nous avions environ 26 délégations qui souhaitaient prendre la parole sur ce sujet. Dans ces conditions, je vous propose, si vous êtes d'accord, de réduire, en tout cas de limiter vos interventions à environ 4-5 minutes, afin que nous puissions tenir nos délais. Nous pourrions effectivement discuter de ces plans d'action longuement, mais nous sommes tenus par les délais qui s'imposent à nous. Donc, je vous propose maintenant de passer la parole au distingué délégué du Nigeria. Alors, en attendant que le distingué délégué du Nigeria puisse intervenir, je vous informe que les délégations suivantes pourront s'exprimer: la Mauritanie, la Colombie, le Sénégal, la Somalie, le Tadjikistan et la Turquie.
Mr. Chairman, members of the panel, good afternoon once more. And I thank you and the organizers for giving Nigeria the chance to brief on our updated work plan in accordance with Article 5 of the Anti-Personnel Mine Convention. Next slide, please. An overview of Nigeria. Nigeria is a country with over 200 million people. Currently, Nigeria is embroiled in several conflicts on so many fronts. The most popular one, or the most known to the world, is the Northeast insurgency that is pitting the Nigerian security forces with ISWAP and Boko Haram. In the middle of the country, we also have the farmer-herder clashes in the central of Nigeria. We also have a problem of bandits operating in the northwest of the country. Next slide, please. The purpose of this, the purpose of this presentation is to go back to the commitments that Nigeria made at the 19 MSP in 2021. Unfortunately, we were not represented at the MSP of the 28th MSP of 2022. During that meeting, Nigeria submitted a request for an extension to the end of December 2025. The request for the extension was on the understanding that Nigeria will carry out the following actions. We committed ourselves to establishing a National Mine Action Center to address the threat. We also endeavored to develop a national mine action standards and also strengthen the coordination and delivery of explosive risk education. Next slide, please. We also agreed to continue information collection efforts on the threat that is posed by not only anti-personnel mines, but all other kinds of explosive ordinances that are found in the country. Next, please. Permit me then to say what progress we have made since we took that commitment in 2021. From that day to now, the federal government of Nigeria has given the approval for the establishment of the National Humanitarian Mine Action Committee. This committee is basically Nigeria's National Mine Action Authority, with the permission that it will mutate into a National Mine Action Center with field offices across the country. Another progress made for the period on the report is that Nigeria ratified the cluster, the Convention on Cluster Munition. We also had, in support with the United Nations Mine Action Services, we developed national mine action standards for not only URE, but also victim assistance. The National Humanitarian Mine Action Committee will strengthen the coordination and delivery of explosive risk ordnance education. We will also continue information collection efforts on the threat posed by anti-personnel mines by discovering new areas of contamination in the Southeast and the collection of information on explosive ordnance incidents, plus data on victims and survivors. Next slide, please. Sorry, go back, please, sorry. We were also able to develop a draft National Humanitarian Man Action Strategy covering 5 years, 2023-2028. This strategy has been drafted. It has been shared with all stakeholders. And just before we left for this meeting in Nigeria, we have received the feedback from all the stakeholders. And there's a meeting that is scheduled in July to validate and finalize that document, which will become a federal government document. There's also the desire to include a costed, realistic action plan. Now, apart from the the threat of explosive ordinances in the Northeast, during the intervening period, it came to the attention of the committee that there are newly discovered areas that are contaminated, not in the Northeast, but in the Southeast of the country, where Nigeria in the years 1967 to 1970, unfortunately had a civil war. It came to our notice that there are many areas, villages, schools, farms that are contaminated with different kinds of explosive ordinances as seen on the screen, which have not been cleared. So that is to say, when we're talking of Nigeria, it is good to bring to the attention of this committee, we're only not talking of the Northeast, but also of the Southeast of the country. Next slide, please. One of the questions we're supposed to answer is what work remains in order for Nigeria to be in compliance with its Article 5 obligations. First among the list is the staffing and equipping of the National Humanitarian Mine Action Center and the NMAA, which is the National Humanitarian Mine Action Committee. We also want to finalize Nigeria's National Humanitarian Action Strategy, which, like I said, has been drafted, has been shared with stakeholders, and we have received, we acknowledge that, received input from all national and international mine action stakeholders. We also want to set up a national information management system for mine action, because without that, what we are doing now is to collect pieces and bits of information from across the country, specifically from local organizations that are in the areas where mine is contaminated. But we aim to transfer that into an IMSMA system. There's also the issue of technical survey. Right now, no technical survey has taken part in Nigeria. So for that reason, you'll find that invariably when we are presenting, we do not have the size of area that will be contaminated. This is very important, and we do not have the capacity to do that. So unless we have that technical survey, issues like even budgeting, because we do not know the area, the kind of effort that is required, it's very difficult for us to arrive at that. We are also working in collaboration with the ICRC to draft a law that will give legal backing to humanitarian action in Nigeria. Already we have identified, as Nigeria is transition with new members of parliament, we have identified champions within the new coming legislators that will carry this draft bill and make sure that it is passed into law. There's also the issue of destruction of all types of explosive ordinances within Nigeria's territory, and the continued collection of sex, age, and disability disaggregated data and information on the threats posed by anti-personnel mine, collecting data on EO incidents, as well as for victims and survivors for use during victim assistance. Next slide, please. We get being asked whether Nigeria is on track to fulfilling its mine clearance obligation under Article 5 by the deadline of December 2025. Well, right now, it will be difficult to answer that question. However, what I want to say is that the establishment of the National Humanitarian Mine Action Committee via a presidential directive is to serve as Nigeria's NMAE. This gives hope for optimism that Nigeria's efforts, as opposed to the past years, will be more targeted, more nuanced, and more result-oriented. There's also the concerted effort by both national and international mine action stakeholders required through advocacy and technical support. Here, I will call on the international community and all the mine action stakeholders, here to see that more advocacy is done in Nigeria to bring awareness, because we have a new government and a new set of legislators. I think seizing this opportunity to do more advocacy will be a good thing. There is a big opportunity in the new incoming government for advocacy, because if the international mine action actors will push from outside and we in the committee will push from inside, I'm sure the desired result will be obtained. Finally, with more than 2 years remaining to the 2025 December deadline, I would say it is still possible for Nigeria to meet most of its obligation, but a definite call can only be made in the year 2024. We look forward to the next member states meeting to really finalize and discuss, and I think it is that time that we'll make a decision whether Nigeria will indeed make the 2025 December deadline, or like other countries did, will also ask for an extension. Next slide. What are our priorities for external assistance to support Nigeria's fulfillment of its Article 5 obligations? We would require assistance in equipping the approved National Mine Action Center and the satellite field offices by use of off-road vehicles, PPE, demining equipment, communications equipment. These are things that are sine qua non for us to proceed better. I've also spoken of assistance in technical survey, without which we do not have granular information that will assist us in going ahead with our mine action interventions. We also seek assistance in setting up information management systems, as well as building national capacity preparatory for national ownership and transfer. We have asked several interlocutors of visits that will allow us to visit existing and well-established mine action centers as a way of peer learning, because we believe we need to see these things actually, working on the ground to know what we replicate in our country, put it in our own local context. And here I must thank the implementation support unit and other donors that have been working hard to see that this visit is effected, so that we'll know where we're going from here going forward. Next slide, please. Certainly, we have some challenges. I start with this transitioning government. And Nigeria just finished an election, and there's a new government in place with new ministers, with new ministries, with new legislators. However, while this is a challenge, it is also an opportunity. It is normal when a new government in place, humanitarian actors, UN agencies will pay visits to the incoming government. We would really appreciate and will call on all stakeholders that have engagements with our government at home to bring to bear, the call for advocacy on humanitarian mine action. There's also this, the challenges of limited budget. The committee, which is acting as Nigeria's Mine Action Authority, was established last year in October 2022. What that means is that in the Nigerian budgeting cycle, we missed the budget cycle of 2023. While we have assurances that going forward, humanitarian mine action will be well funded, the fact is that from now on to the end of this year, we do not have the budget to carry out the activities that we lined up in our National Humanitarian Mine Action Strategy. The United Nations budget, when you look at the humanitarian outlook, is also not sufficient. Like in every country, sometimes what the UN projects is expected finances. From our own in Nigeria, we find that sometimes even where these finances are available, it stops at about 55 or 60% on the average. So that means definitely there is a budgeting gap. And even I mentioned earlier this morning that we have about 1.2 people needing humanitarian mine action, for which the UN mine action for this year is only taking care of, I think 600 or 700. So that means definitely there is a gap which we are looking forward to see any donor or any country or anybody that will help us to, cover that gap. Next slide. Okay. The only other which I missed on that other is the issue of coordination, as is provided in the International Mine Action Center. In the absence of a national body, UNMAS and other international organizations have been carrying out the work that is done by the National Mine Action Center. With the establishment of the Mine Action Center now, there is need for more coordination so that there's no duplication of efforts. And we hope that the committee that is in place now will receive all cooperation from the international Mine Action stakeholders to ensure that we do not have a duplication of effort and there's a well-coordinated approach to mine action activities in Nigeria. On that note, I once more thank the organizers of this meeting and the committee for hearing us out. We look forward to more engagement with the international community. Thank you very much.
Je remercie le distingué délégué du Nigeria. Il est 18h01. Les interprètes nous offrent gracieusement 10 minutes supplémentaires de leur temps. Je vous propose d'écouter très rapidement l'intervention du délégué de la Colombie, qui doit durer environ 3 minutes, après quoi nous nous séparerons.
Gracias, señor presidente. Permítame hacer esta declaración en mi capacidad nacional. Señor presidente, distinguidos delegados, Colombia agradece esta oportunidad para ratificar su irrestricto compromiso con la Convención sobre la Prohibición de las Minas Antipersonal y con las medidas del Plan de Acción de Oslo, en particular con las relacionadas con el cumplimiento del artículo 5. Nuestro país ha presentado 2 solicitudes de exención, la primera vez en 2010 y la segunda en 2020. En cumplimiento de los compromisos adquiridos en esta última ocasión, el pasado 8 de mayo, Colombia remitió una versión revisada y actualizada de su plan operativo para el desminado humanitario 2023-2025, en los que también se tomaron en cuenta las directrices del gobierno del presidente Gustavo Petro, contenidas en su política de paz total, y en el Plan Nacional de Desarrollo 2022-2026, denominado Colombia Potencia Mundial para la Vida. Para la formulación de este plan operativo se empleó una estrategia de diálogos regionales y diálogos temáticos preparatorios con participación abierta a todos los actores interesados o stakeholders. En él se establecieron las metas en actividades de desminado humanitario a nivel local en todo el territorio colombiano para el periodo que resta para el cumplimiento de la actual extensión de prórroga que vence el 31 de diciembre de 2025. Por su parte, y debido a la situación de seguridad que se presenta en varias regiones del país, nuestra instancia interinstitucional de desminado humanitario, que reúne a las autoridades nacionales competentes en la materia, definió una nueva forma de división territorial para intervenir los territorios, denominada microzonificación, lo cual ha permitido avanzar en las tareas de desminado humanitario en aquellas zonas con afectación por minas antipersonal sin generar mayor riesgo para la comunidad y los operadores. Señor presidente, como avance general del cumplimiento del artículo 5 de la Convención, quisiera compartir algunos datos relacionados con su implementación nacional. Colombia está dividida administrativamente por 1.122 municipios, de los cuales 896 se encuentran libres de sospecha. Es decir, Colombia tiene el 79.88% de su territorio libre de sospecha de minas antipersonal. En 102 municipios, el 8% del territorio, se encuentran activas operaciones asignadas a las 7 organizaciones de desminado humanitario autorizadas para operar en el país. 124 municipios, el 12% del territorio nacional, no han podido ser intervenidos, toda vez que no cuentan con las condiciones para hacerlo mediante operaciones de desminado humanitarios, condiciones de seguridad. Uno de los mayores retos para Colombia está representado por las afectaciones con poblaciones en las cuales hay una alta presencia de grupos afrodescendientes e indígenas en su mayoría. También en los municipios y en las áreas en las que se adelantan programas de desarrollo con enfoque territorial, PEDET, con programas de sustitución de cultivos ilícitos, con solicitudes de restitución de tierras y con plan de retorno y reubicación de la población desplazada por el conflicto armado. En lo relacionado a otros desafíos para la acción integral contra minas, es pertinente señalar que el 45% del total de accidentes por minas antipersonal se presentan en territorios ocupados por las comunidades étnicas y cerca de la mitad de sus municipios tienen prevalencia de víctimas por minas antipersonal en los 2 últimos años. Estos territorios registran permanentemente presencia de actores ilegales asociados a economías ilegales, siendo la instalación de minas una actividad prevalente. Por lo anterior y reconociendo el compromiso tanto con la Convención como con nuestros ciudadanos, Colombia toma muy en serio el desarrollo de actividades de prevención y educación en el riesgo de minas, con especial énfasis en el enlace comunitario con miras a proyectar el desminado humanitario como una acción que genere confianza entre la comunidad y los actores que adelantan las actividades de desminado humanitario. Quiero también hacer referencia a la importancia de mi país con la inclusión de un enfoque de género en los ámbitos de gobernanza y también en los ámbitos técnicos de seguridad y de acción humanitaria. Deseo destacar que la capacidad operacional del país, representada en las 7 organizaciones de desminado humanitario, cuenta con 817 expertos en estudios no técnicos, de los cuales 143 son mujeres. Asimismo, tenemos 3.600 desminadores, entre los que hay 125 mujeres y 208 expertas en disposición de artefactos explosivos. Sabemos que tenemos un reto para que haya mayor participación de las mujeres en el sector, asunto en el que estamos trabajando. Estamos comprometidos con una política de equidad de género y representación y empoderamiento de las mujeres como agentes transformadores y motor del desarrollo sostenible. La capacidad operacional, aunada en las actividades de enlace comunitario, en el marco de la educación en el riesgo de minas, el compromiso del Estado para avanzar en materia de acción integral contra minas, el apoyo de la comunidad internacional, han sido fundamentales para el cumplimiento de las obligaciones del artículo 5 en mi país, en especial en declarar libres de sospecha de minas a 102 municipios que se encuentran en operaciones actualmente antes del 31 de diciembre de 2025. Señor presidente, estimados delegados, deseo finalizar reiterando la disposición de mi gobierno para continuar nuestro diálogo cooperativo con el Comité del Artículo 5 y con todos los actores interesados para compartir nuestra experiencia y buenas prácticas adquiridas en estos años de implementación de la Convención en mi país. Muchas gracias.
Je remercie le distingué délégué de la Colombie pour son intervention. Je remercie également l'ensemble des délégués qui sont intervenus cet après-midi sur ce point inscrit à l'ordre du jour, ainsi que l'ensemble des délégués qui ont prêté toute leur attention à ces déclarations. Nous continuerons cette session mercredi prochain. J'en profite pour rappeler que si on veut s'assurer que chaque délégation puisse délivrer son intervention, il peut être opportun pour chacun des délégués qui doit encore s'exprimer de peut-être revisiter, relire son intervention et peut-être de la réduire pour rentrer dans un format de 4 à 5 minutes qui nous permettra donc de pouvoir écouter l'ensemble des délégués. La journée de demain est consacrée à des interventions, à des panels thématiques, pardon. Elle commencera à 10 h et je vous remercie de nous rejoindre à cette heure-là, donc demain 10 h. Et je remercie bien entendu les traducteurs qui ont pris de leur temps pour nous permettre de terminer cette intervention. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. Le prochain.